evening. Welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness. I'm your host, Janelle Elgaway. Tonight, we have a very special show honoring the memory of Doug Hale. Doug passed away October 11th, 2016 by suicide after his doctors removed his opiate medication. People with long-term chronic pain deserve the right to live the best quality of life possible. We didn't ask to have these health issues. Now, the media, medical institutions, and government want to bunch addicts and chronic pain patients together. This is not humane, and we must unite and come together before our rights as pain patients are completely taken away. This is not a matter of if, but when. Tonight, we have doctors and pain patient advocates on to discuss this issue and stand together and support one another during this very difficult time. At the end, we will be taking questions or calls if you'd like to share something on this topic.
Welcome. Can you please tell me your name and who you're here with, and a little bit about yourself?
My name is Tammi, and this is my daughter. I'm Nikki. We're here for my late husband, Doug, Nikki's father. He committed suicide exactly 1 year ago today on October 11th, 2016. And my prayer for him every day is that he is free of pain.
Why are you wanting to speak at this vigil this evening?
Doug was essentially abandoned from proper pain management by his physician. He was stable for years on high doses of opioids for intractable chronic pain. His physician cut him down drastically over a 2-year period and then suddenly stopped prescribing altogether. In late 2016, he completely destabilized after that. He was treated inhumanely. Doug spent 41 days detoxing at home with absolutely no support from the medical community, and our repeated pleas for help fell on deaf ears. After his death, I learned that the new CDC voluntary guidelines were causing droves of physicians to stop prescribing opioids out of fear of losing their licenses. A far greater consequence has been the increased suffering of chronic pain patients, as well as a growing rash of suicides as a result. As the guidelines continue to tighten, this genocide is on the rise and it needs to stop. We as a country, chronic pain patients, their families, caregivers, friends, and the medical establishment need to work together to shed light on this epidemic. The voiceless need to be heard. Please, please, everyone listening, speak out. Tell your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, people you meet on the street, everyone, to speak out. Send letters to our state senators and representatives. If the government is flooded, they should not be able to continue to turn a blind eye to this epidemic. Janelle is kind enough to be willing to collect the letters and find a person from each state to deliver these letters in person if possible. The anguish of these patients living with chronic pain, as well as the anguish of those who have lost our pain warriors to suicide, it needs to be addressed. No, it deserves to be addressed. Thank you.
Who is held accountable?
Who's held accountable?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the physicians for following the guidelines, but I believe that the CDC is held accountable for making the guidelines so stringent and unrealistic.
What advice do you have for others listening in tonight?
Speak up. We are being marginalized. We are being put on the shelf and being allowed to commit suicide. People are left with the choice of living with chronic pain, intractable chronic pain with no opioids or very little opioids. Or they can choose street drugs, which some do, or they can commit suicide. And all three of those are not good choices, and we deserve better. Mm-hmm. We have to speak out as a group, loudly and clearly.
If someone from the head of the state or even the president is listening in tonight, what would you like to say to them?
I would like to ask them to revamp the CDC guidelines on prescribing opioids for long-term chronic pain. People are being denied access to opioids and being tortured to death. And it is inhumane, and the practice needs to be reevaluated and changed. Our animals receive better treatment than our humans in this country.
What does this vigil mean to you tonight?
This vigil means a lot to me and to my family and to Nikki. She lost her dad. I lost my husband. And there's a lot of other people who have lost loved ones, not to mention the countless thousands that are suffering needlessly, that are responsibly using their opioids. And they deserve to have them, just like the diabetics deserve to have insulin. It's not fair, and the policy needs to change.
Nikki, do you have any last words for everybody here tonight?
I would just like to say that I miss my dad. I'm only 32. I'm family planning, and my dad doesn't get to be part of that. And to that end, please speak out. And along with family planning, I'm actually a pediatric medical coder, and I code thousands of charts each month for children. And I see the trend even with our children. And my greatest fear is that we lose a great percentage of the next generation because children with no other option who are being denied opioid pain for open fractures may commit suicide. Are we willing to lose the next generation to comply with CDC guidelines? But please speak out. Please consider the next generation. It only takes one car accident to be in chronic pain. It only takes one fall off of a skateboard. It only takes one small little trip over a carpet to break something, to hurt something, to break something in your body and to not be able to repair it and to be stuck with this chronic pain that will not go away. Please speak up. How many are we willing to lose?
Tammi, any last words?
Thank you, Janelle, so much for sharing this message with America. Please, people, stand up for the chronic pain, especially those who are too weak to stand up for themselves.
Well, ladies, thank you so much. Welcome this evening to the vigil. Can you please tell me your name and why you're here?
My name is Richard Lawhern. I am an advocate for chronic pain patients with 20 years of experience in the field. I wanted to join you to talk a little bit about aspects of the so-called opioid epidemic or opioid crisis that are severely impacting pain patients all around the U.S. and Canada, and which are causing the suicides of possibly as many as hundreds of patients because of denial of care. A little background, if I might. I got into chronic pain advocacy about 20 years ago, and I come to it not as a physician, because I'm not a licensed physician, but as the spouse and father of chronic pain patients. I was recruited into the U.S. Trigeminal Neuralgia Association in 1996 as their webmaster and basically research analyst, because that's where my training is. I'm an engineer by profession, but I am an information miner and technology analyst by experience, and I joined the TNA group to help them to broaden their web footprint and make their disorder more known. It produces some very horrendous facial pain. Beyond that, however, I've gotten very active in recent years having to do with the problems that patients are having getting treatment as a direct outgrowth of the publication in March 2016 of a guideline on prescription of opioid analgesics by the CDC. And I daily touch probably as many as 20,000 members in various Facebook groups who are deeply concerned with this issue. And I see the social media and the, if you will, the mainstream media hysteria over the idea that somehow our opioid epidemic and the addiction epidemic that's a part of all that have in some way been caused by overprescription of opioids. And I do not find a convincing case for that idea. In fact, I find just the opposite. In many cases, patients are under-prescribed opiates, and especially recently, they are being forced and coerced to stop taking opioids that have in many cases been effective and safe and non-addictive for years. And all of that involves a tremendous amount of hype and hysteria and junk science and advocacy on the part of people whom I'm coming to believe are financially self-interested in cutting off pain patients.
Why is this happening? What is the real motive behind all of this? And, what do we have to do to change this? Can we change this? Okay.
Yes, it can be changed. That's one message, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be done with petitions and letters.
Okay.
There are people out there who genuinely believe that pain patients do not really benefit from opioids. I don't think very many of those people are properly trained, and I think a good number of them may have financial interests in portraying pain patients as addicts. This is particularly true among addiction treatment therapists, unfortunately, and some addiction psychiatrists who aren't really qualified in pain management, but who have come to be public commentators on it. And they represent the idea that opioids really aren't helpful over the long term for very many people and may actually be harmful for some and for large numbers. That position is actually a distortion of truth, and it is one that increasingly pain patients are pointing out. There are very few long-term studies of opioids, but there are some, and one in particular is outstanding, which was what's called a Cochrane review, where a team put together the results of multiple published studies and looked for the protocols of those studies to understand whether they were strong or weak evidence. And they found that among more than 8,000 patients who were prescribed opioids for the first time, a year later, the rates of diagnosis for what is called opioid abuse disorder were less than 2%. In fact, potentially less than 0.5%. That study was systematically excluded from the March 2016 opioid prescription guidelines derived by the CDC. And it was excluded in a manner that constituted obvious and provable bias on the part of the writing team that was convened as the Central Core Consultants Group that wrote the guidelines. That fact has been published by a team that went back in and checked the research to find out exactly how the CDC standards were put together. In fact, evidence for opioids was discounted if it did not result from a study of at least 1 year duration. But all of the evidence of any maturity and any time length on non-opioid prescriptions or behavioral therapies was used. That criteria was fundamentally unfair, and it was not acknowledged in the guidelines. So what we've got is a guideline that is biased as a political statement on the part of people who stand to gain financially if patients are relabeled as addicts and treated as addicts. Two groups of people are involved in that as far as motive are concerned. One are professional professional therapists in addiction treatment who hope for more research funds and for more support for what they do with patients. The other is insurance companies that want to cut down on the expenses of treating chronic pain patients because they never get better. And once a person has been treated for an extended period, let us say on the order of a year or more, the likelihood that they are no longer going to be treated for a condition that produces enormous pain is really very small, because right now we don't know how to cure them. and the pain itself can very often be progressive. It can cause conditions that actually make it harder to treat over time. Insurance companies do not have morals. They do have bottom lines, and they are supporting the denial of opioid analgesics to pain patients in an effort to reduce their costs. They may not know that. They may, in fact, have simply picked the evidence to support their instincts, but that is, in fact, what's going on here. Now, as far as doing something about this condition, there are quite a number of things going on in social media, some of them useful and some of them not so much so. But one of the things that is going on is that people are increasingly being sensitized to the need to contradict the dominant public narrative on this subject. And that means basically weighing in when they see an article that is obviously biased against pain patients. Anytime they can, going in and posting commentaries and oppositional commentaries that are founded on published science. That's one element. It's called being a truth squad. Sometimes it's only a truth squad of one, and I'm certainly in that category. Sometimes it's a truth squad of multiple people supported by medical professionals who have realized what is going on and who consider it profoundly unethical and immoral. There are quite a number of those, and some of them belong to a group that I'm active in. It's certainly not the only group. We are calling ourselves the Alliance for the Treatment of Intractable Pain, and we're recruiting right now. And the people we're recruiting are not people to necessarily do the narratives or commentaries. We want people who are themselves or through a family member able to schedule appointments with the health care-related staffs of their legislators, and that means representatives, senators, governor's offices, state departments of health, and local legislators. And the idea here is let's give a face to human pain and put that face in front of legislators and their staffs, and basically tell these people, hey guys, you got it wrong. Not only do you have it wrong, you are becoming complicit in the deaths and destruction of hundreds of thousands of people, and you gotta fix this. We'll help you do that, but you must first listen and realize that everything you thought you knew about addiction is wrong, and we can prove it. And we're going to give you follow-up papers to do just that. But in the meantime, we want you to hear our stories. Such a story doesn't have to take a tremendously long time. If our people who go in front of their legislators are prepared, it can be a half an hour or longer, and we will back you up. There is, in fact, a drug war underway that is persecuting and prosecuting physicians who prescribe above a magical level that is basically 100 morphine milligram equivalent daily dose that is mentioned in the CDC guidelines, but which is not required by the guidelines. The insurance companies are putting pressure on hospitals to reduce the number of opioid prescriptions that they hand out. They are putting pressure on doctor practices, and they are deliberately pursuing physicians who treat lots of chronic pain patients and generate a high volume of prescriptions. The idea is that any doctor who does that is probably operating a pill mill. Now, there have been pill mills in the past, and we should not ignore that. But under the present conditions, the number of prescriptions that doctors are writing for pain patients have dropped by almost a third since 2010. And it is not accidental that in the same period, the number of deaths by heroin overdose have tripled. Those two factors are related. And they're related because doctors basically are not treating addicts. They're treating pain patients, and they're being forced to force pain patients off of or down of doses of opioid analgesics, which work for them, and which we know work for them, but they don't want to wind up forced out of practice. And the USDEA and state authorities are doing just that, and they're doing it indiscriminately. Very often they will go into a doctor's office on a no-knock inspection. They will confiscate his medical records. They will widely publish that he is a pill mill operator, or at least imply it. And then they will hold up the proceedings for years in order to drive that doctor into bankruptcy. That is a common practice of the DEA, and it is widespread reported in social media. And if you've heard a certain edge in my voice, it's because it's one of the practices that I get absolutely infuriated over. But it is, in fact, what's going on. Confiscation of doctor assets is being used to deny them the funds to defend themselves. And witnesses are being tampered with by the DEA prosecutors to ensure that the story the DEA wants to have told is told. And by tampering, I mean what happens is they'll go into a practice and they'll say to a physician's assistant or a nurse, hey, you know, we want to know about cases where the doctor has harmed patients. We don't want to know about any of the others, but if you will give us the evidence and testify to it, you won't be prosecuted. If you won't give us the evidence, we'll put your ass in jail. That's exactly what's going on out there. And pardon my French, I don't mean to be obscene with you, but this is an obscene misuse and malapplication of public resources and of law enforcement resources.
What's going to happen if this continues? Where will this rabbit hole go if nothing is done?
More patients will die. More legislators will think they are solving the problem by legislating absolutely draconian, unreasonable limits on the prescription of pain. Doctors will lose their credibility with patients that they could have helped but now can't because they're being restricted. And the opioid epidemic will get worse, not because of pain management, not because of opioids prescribed by doctors, but because of street drugs. Right now, the opioid crisis, unbeknownst to many of the people who think they're expert on this subject, is not being created by pain patients, and it never was. It's being created by the diversion of prescription medicines and by street drugs like heroin, synthetic fentanyl, stolen and diverted morphine from hospital pharmacies, and methadone that's being diverted out of treatment programs in communities. Those are the major drivers in of the opioid epidemic, and the CDC statistics from that organization itself demonstrate it. And these are things that are published in venues like the National Pain Report or Pain News Network, both of which are very good as advocates for chronic pain patients. So what will happen? People will go on dying, and more of them will die, and more of them will be denied pain treatment, and the cost of disability insurance will go up. What we need is several U.S. representatives and senators to write the director of the CDC and tell him that you're not going to get an appropriation until you withdraw the CDC guidelines of March 2016 and have them rewritten by a group that knows what the Sam Hill it's doing. This time around, and I hope we are able to encourage legislators to make this quite explicit, the group that does the rewriting on this needs to be run by pain management specialists instead of addiction therapists. And it needs to include pain patients as voting members. We need to get this problem back into some reasonable balance and realize that the war on drugs has failed outright, and CDC should not be a party to any more of the same nonsense. And you can hear the passion in my voice. I've talked with in the last 2 weeks, I've talked with 2 surviving spouses of people who suicided because their doctors dropped them and wouldn't refer them to anybody else. I know these people. They're credible. They're real. And they are just a drop in a much larger bucket. I know of a doctor by the name of Dr. Thomas Kline who has published 25 case histories that are verified of patients who have committed suicide because they were denied treatment. And, in fact, some of them were driven into withdrawal by the cold turkey cessation of opioid treatments by doctors who were too scared to help them. And that has to change. That has to change. And the only way that I know of that it will change is that that legislators must hear, you messed up, guys. You got to stop the war against pain patients because that's what you're supporting. And you have become complicit in the deaths and destruction of hundreds of thousands of people. Stop.
Just so you know, too, Dr. Kline will be speaking on this, so he'll be.
I'm glad of it. He's quite competent to make this case.
I agree. What can all the people here tonight listening in that are going through this, what can they do right now?
You need to be thinking about learning enough, first of all, to be credible as someone who is giving testimony and asking for redress from your legislators. And second of all, you need to think about finding in the most available office of your legislator and scheduling an in-person appointment with an individual in that office or who will travel to that office from D.C. to tell your story and to tell these people, look, here's what you got wrong. And we'll give you, we in this case meaning my group and a good number of others, we'll give you basic information that you can leave with them, and we'll coach you on how to tell a real story to real people to say, guys, you got it wrong. You got to fix this. And if enough people schedule those appointments and go and speak and follow up and make phone calls to say, what are you doing about the interview I just gave you? Then the story is eventually going to get out to the legislator. Hey, boss, you really ought to listen to this. You really ought to hear these people. We've messed up. This whole argument is being founded on mythology, not fact. And pain patients are suffering because we got it wrong.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with everyone listening this evening?
Yeah. You are not alone. That's the most powerful message of social media. It's the most powerful message in the treatment of pain because pain is enormously isolating. People don't understand what you're going through. They can't see it. In many cases, at least, they can't see it. In social media, Facebook being one of them and not the only one, you get a chance to talk to other people who are experiencing many of the same things you are. But you are not alone, and there are a growing number of medical professionals like Dr. Kline, like Dr. Tennant, like Dr. Stefan Kerzetz, and I can't pronounce his name worth a darn. I'm sorry, Stefan, and several others who are speaking out and writing and publishing the fact that the CDC guidelines are just plain wrong on principle. There was an excellent article that I would refer anyone to, and you can find it on Google very easily. And the title was Neat, Plausible, and Mostly Wrong. And it's a commentary on the CDC guidelines. It basically demonstrates all of or almost all of the ways that the CDC guidelines went bad. There's another article, which I will acknowledge I wrote. And that article is, how would prescription guidelines, opioid prescription guidelines read if pain patients wrote them. That guideline, or that shows an alternative to the CDC guidelines, and it was taken up and republished by the Journal of Medicine and introduced by Pain Week. Pain Week called it, what if prescription guidelines were patient-centered? And if you use words like that in a Google search, you're going to find it as one of the top hits. So what I would have to say to patients is you're not alone. And I'm not the only one that's out there kicking tail and taking names. There are increasing numbers of qualified medical people who are standing up and telling their own profession and telling the government, you got it wrong. Fix it. And we're gonna go on working to do just that. I would add one other footnote. I am not funded by anybody to do this. I am a volunteer with 20 years of experience in chronic pain support in multiple forms, and I've got a list of published work as long as your arm. There are many others that are now coming to the same conclusion, that they have to stand up and speak out. And we're going to go on doing this until the legislators wake up and smell the coffee. You are not alone. We will not desert you. We ask that you come join us and join others in the activities that are necessary to change the public perception on this issue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Lawhern, for joining us this evening.
Take care. Ciao, ciao.
All right. Bye-bye. Good evening, Stacey, and welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness. Tonight we are having our Candlelight Vigil, and if you could please give me your full name and tell me a little bit about yourself.
My name is Stacey Fields, and I have had chronic pancreatitis for about 14 years now. I run a pancreatitis support group that has over 2,500 members, and that's what I put a lot of my time into. It's the National Chronic Pancreatitis Support Network.
Okay, great. So why are you here tonight speaking out at this vigil?
I'm here because of people like Doug Hale who have taken their lives because of uncontrolled pain. What they're doing to pain patients is not right. It's basically genocide. People are struggling, and they're either going to turn to suicide or to the streets.
What changes are needed so this doesn't continue to happen?
Well, when they wrote the CDC guidelines, they broke a lot of transparency administrative laws, and they were warned by Congress, the ACLU, the Washington Justice League, on how they were doing it, and they basically did not pay attention to that. So their core export group was nothing but addictions counselors or doctors. There was nobody representing chronic pain. Addicts were taken in front of Congress to speak. Again, no pain patients, no pain doctors. They're using a one-size-fits-all approach, which is unscientifically unsound, you know?
Mm-hmm. So if you could go back to what you know now, when this first started happening to you, what would you tell yourself?
Honestly, I would have tried to skip a few doses and put them back for the bad days.
Your pain medicine you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. What has happened to you that you've had to learn?
I was on stable doses for a long time, and when this stuff came into play, my long-acting medication was cut in half, and my short-acting for breakthrough pain was cut by 2/3.
How long has
We're not being treated as individuals.
Right.
For a year now.
Wow. And how has your body reacted? How have you been physically and mentally since these changes?
Oh, it's a lot worse. Excuse me. Food makes me hurt, so I tend not to eat much. My blood pressure is out of control, even on blood pressure medications. You begin to where you can't think clearly because you're in so much pain that's all you can think of. And my body pours sweat profusely. My doctor had told me it was my body's reaction to intense pain. I don't go out very often.
Are you depressed now?
Maybe a little bit sometimes. I pretty well stay active advocating for chronic pain patients and chronic pancreatitis patients, so I keep myself as busy as I can, which I do most of that over the internet.
Right. Who do you hold accountable for the issues you're having right now with your health?
Well, Dr. Kolodny, for sure, and Dr. Frieden, who used to run the CDC. Dr. Kolodny went to the FDA first, and they turned him down. So then he went to the CDC, who Dr. Frieden, Tom Frieden, ran at the time, and they were friends from 20 years before when they worked together at the New York Board of Health. So there's all kinds of conflict of interest going on here.
What advice do you have for others listening in tonight?
Call your senators, your House reps, your governors, and don't stop calling until they hear you.
What would you like to say to the person listening in from the head of the state that can make these changes happen? What do you have to say to them?
I'd like to say there are 100 million pain patients in this country, and we vote, and we are going to be out in full force next election.
And what last words would you like to share with everyone joining us tonight at this online virtual vigil?
Anyone who's not advocating for this needs to start, because everyone at some point will experience pain in their life.
Yes. And I keep saying it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of just when. So I agree. Yeah. Well, Stacey,
I know people who have had surgeries with no medication afterwards.
Yeah, you're right. And it's
Crazy.
just going to get worse. It is.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything else that you want to share with before we get going?
I don't think so. I just think everybody needs to do their homework and stand up for their rights. We're being discriminated against, and everybody, not just pain patients, needs to stand up and be screaming.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing and coming together and being a voice, because together we are stronger. And, one voice can do one voice worth of work. But many of us coming together, all of us, that is where we're going to have strength and power. And I do believe that we are going to make a change in this. But thank you so much.
Thank you, honey.
Welcome this evening, and thank you so much for joining us. Please tell me your name and if you are here for yourself or someone else.
My name is Meagan, and I am currently a chronic pain patient, but I have lost someone due to the CDC guideline rules in chronic pain.
Why are you here tonight speaking out at this vigil?
Because I'm tired of every day hearing about another suicide, a chronic pain patient being denied their medications and not having any hope. There's a lack of hope in the chronic pain community right now, and it's absolutely horrific what's going on, and it needs to be stopped. Things need to change.
What changes are needed? What change?
We need to, first of all, we need to repeal, just completely get rid of the CDC guidelines. When they were set up, there was a lot of nervousness in the chronic pain community about them, but, you know, the people that pushed it through said it's just guidelines and it's only going to affect, you know, dentists and primary care doctors and people that don't deal with chronic pain patients on a normal basis and acute pain, you know, just for guidelines for acute pain management and things like that. So it was packaged and delivered in a completely deceitful way. In addition to the fact that the facts in it aren't the full facts, that the groups that put their input in cherry-picked all just the facts that they wanted out there for their agenda. So it wasn't given the appropriate time, I think, to get the full spectrum of what the situation needed. And also it was delivered in a deceitful manner, saying that, you know, it says right in the guidelines, these are not laws. These are just, you know, things that we think that dentists could be doing different and that primary care providers could be doing different, and, you know, in handling acute pain situations where, you know, pain lasting less than a month or whatever. And it was stated that it was going to be completely cutting out chronic pain patients. That wasn't going to be a demographic that was included in this. But as soon as they came out, doctors had been arrested, and doctors started getting nervous. And so chronic pain patients and chronic pain specialists just instantly implemented them as practice in policy changes in their practice. So all that was the start, I believe, and we can just get rid of that and completely restart the conversation and where we need to go with any kind of laws and changes. That would definitely be a good start.
Who should be held accountable for all of this?
Well, definitely organizations like PROP and Andrew Kline, who's pushed a narrative of addiction all over the place, and you know, he's got rehabs and stuff. So obviously there's money in rehabs, and so I think people like that and the government for not allowing more of a public input into when the guidelines were drafted up, and they purposely left out the chronic pain patients and supporting physicians to speak out on behalf of, you know, make it a balance. So the clumping together of pain patients and addicts that we're all one and the same, or that the narrative that chronic pain patients could become addicts is completely false and totally misrepresents this war on drugs and the numbers that they say they're trying to see saved. It's not saving anybody. The numbers in suicides are rising, and we have, you know, the numbers in illicit drug overdoses are still rising. So nobody's being saved. It's just hurting people all the way around.
What does this vigil mean to you?
To me, it's a sign of hope. We want to remember those that have lost their battle with chronic pain, and we also want to remember those of us who are still here fighting, and to repackage the narrative, I guess you could say, in a way that kind of backtracks the misinformation that we're being told on the news constantly, the opioid crisis and stuff. You know, we need to get back in with the, listening to groups like, like this, like you're doing, and listening to pain patients and doctors, and, keep that hope alive, because right now it seems very bleak. Seems like things are getting worse, and so we really, we need to honor those that, were murdered by the government and by the practices that have been put into effect. But we also need to remember that there's so many of us that are still here to speak out and fight for what needs to be changed in this area.
What last words would you like to share with everyone joining us tonight at this online virtual vigil?
Just to, everybody is in such a bad place right now, and if you can get into a community, online community or whatever of support, if you don't have a supportive family or people around you on a regular basis that understand what you're going through, I would encourage people to do that. There's a huge online community support on all different kind of social media platforms, whatever you're comfortable with, and that would be my words that I would leave with people, is just to hold on to hope, because there's a lot of us out there, and we're all speaking out for those that don't have a voice right now, and it might be a slow process, but things will change.
Well, Meagan, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for what you're going through, but we're happy to have you here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Can you please tell me your name and why you're here?
Yeah, my name is Dr. Forrest Tennant, and I'm delighted to be part of the show. I'm a pain physician and one of the physicians in the country who's at least willing to speak up about the opioid crisis and where we're at and what we need to do at this time.
What are the issues that are going on, and what needs to be changed?
Well, what has happened in the country, particularly since the famous CDC guidelines were issued in 2016, can be, in my opinion, divided into about three parts: the good, bad, and the ugly. And there's some good things that have come out of it, there's some bad things that have come out of it, and there's some really ugly things that have come out of this. And we're in a terrible transition state right now that is totally unexpected, in my opinion, by the drafters of the CDC guidelines and the people who were in leadership positions at the time these guidelines were drafted. And I can go in and get in more detail if you'd like as to my opinion. Sure. Let's start, first off, let me recognize the tragedy first off. The tragedy of this whole issue is that some patients, some people in the country, have been deprived of pain treatment so rapidly and so uncaringly that they have died. And it is a tragedy. And the worst tragedy is not only that they have died, but that we have had certain people trying to propagate the myth that you can just stop medication suddenly, but even worse, that pain does no harm. It's a nuisance, and that there's no reason to treat it, and their medications can just be stopped. And that is a total unadulterated myth. The facts have been known for a long time, and that is if you have severe untreated pain, that you develop cardiac failure due to this, adrenal failure, your immune system is compromised, and you can die in your sleep or either slowly or suddenly. So it is a myth that
pain can go untreated and can just be wished away, and that it does not need to be treated. So the tragedy has been that ignorant, uncaring, and greedy parties, at least some in the United States, have simply thrown people out to pasture, including some good veterans who have served our country well, including other good citizens who developed diseases not due to their fault, and who had pain, who were well treated, and who have been cast out and have either committed suicide or died because they couldn't get treatment. That is the tragedy, and that needs to stop immediately. How that's to happen, I'm not certain, but we've got some other ideas. Now let's talk about the bad things that have happened. The bad thing that has happened is that we have had come forward a constituency in this country who says that we don't need to pay for pain medications through insurance. We've had another bit of rhetoric that, we can treat pain with just marijuana or Suboxone, or there are no people who need high-dose opioids, and so on. Also, we've got a contingency who says, we don't need to treat pain at all with drugs. The bad part is that they have failed to realize that pain is really like a disease, and that of all diseases or medical conditions are either mild, moderate, severe, or catastrophic. And patients in pain fall into those four categories. And the bad part is the United States has a system that is not even prepared to deal with these four categories. It's become very obvious that we've had a dysfunctional pain treatment system for a large number of reasons, and that we've had guidelines, rules. I mean, we've had veterans hospitals that have refused to even give long-standing, decorated, country-serving veterans, just deprive them of needed treatment overnight. In fact, some have died. And so these are the bad and the ugly, are well known, particularly to people who are following this issue. Let me try to turn now to, one other thing about the bad part that I do need to bring up. Pain patients and their families in this country, maybe through no fault of their own, but have been irresponsible in some cases, unreasonable in some cases, but most of all, totally thinking that they didn't need to become educated themselves or advocates or even try to find alternative treatments to their own detriment. And so a lot of patients and families share some blame in this also. They are just not willing to try to work with what in the system that they've had, and they have failed to realize that the government and the professional societies, the drug companies, the insurance companies, the hospitals, the surgeons, you've got a whole host of people out there who are not on their side. And the bad part of it is they just won't accept the fact that we've got a problem. And so that's one of the bad parts, and that is patients and families are going to have to realize they have to be part of this. Well, let me shift to the positive aspects, and there are some. Now, you've had another group of pain patients who have done some wonderful things, and I'll tell you what it is. They've come out of the closet. Since these guidelines were drafted, people have been willing to come out of the closet, just as gays did some years ago, and they're coming out and they're saying, yes, I've got a terrible pain problem, and yes, I take narcotics or I take opioids. They've been willing to come forward and start speaking out. And that's what we're going to have, and we've got to have a lot more of it. That's why I'm on this show, and that's why I'm out recruiting patients and families to start speaking up, start advocating, and above all, educating people that they're not drug addicts, they're not misusing their medication, they're not out there being overdosed, that they're very responsible people. And so we need that rhetoric. We need that advocacy. We need that message now. And I mean, we need it forcefully, because we have too many people on the other side who simply are against the families and the patients and their doctors. So that has probably been the best thing that has happened. Now, some other things have happened. It has forced people like me to step up our research efforts and develop some non-opioid treatments. I can tell you that I am shocked on how well we're developing those things, and some of it's just being published and right now as we speak. But we do have some fairly good new treatments, and we're having a good understanding of the central nervous system on how pain becomes what we call centralized, how it becomes intractable, how it becomes a part of a neuroinflammatory process that can and has to be treated. And so we're developing very rapidly some pretty good non-opioid treatments for the first time. And let me be a little more specific. For the first time, we have two agents that can be taken under the tongue, and one is oxytocin and one is ketamine, and those two have potencies equal to most opioids. So we actually have, for the first time, some new drugs that are going to be able to do some substitution for opioids. Besides new agents, we have a whole protocols now to start treating the underlying cause of pain, and that's the neuroinflammation. And every chronic pain patient in the country right now needs to start understanding that the big failing of the whole opioid push was that opioids provided, in most people, a very incomplete treatment. And that was because all opioids are just symptomatic. Same way with drugs like gabapentin or Lyrica or Zymbalta. Those drugs are just symptomatic. They keep you comfortable, but they don't treat the underlying problem. The underlying problem with chronic pain is what we call neuroinflammation, and this is actually caused by the activation of a little cell in the brain and the spinal cord called the microglial cell. And anyway, protocols have been developed to treat this, and every chronic pain patient in the country needs to start talking to their doctors about getting into protocols to treat the neuroinflammation, because that reduces the need for the opioid drugs. Rather than just out there fighting to get opioids back at an unlimited quantity paid by someone else, patients need to start embracing some of the newer things immediately. Because I, for one, do not believe that the advocacy to bring opioids back is strong enough. Patients and their families are just getting organized. They're just coming out of the closet. Groups are just now being formed, and they do not yet have the political clout to bring about enough changes to go back getting the opioids like they used to. They're going to have to embrace these other newer treatments as soon as possible. So I think that's, again, one of the bits of news that I can bring. So again, just a quick summary. On the ugly side, the deaths. On the bad side, the system has totally developed a huge, politically strong groups in the United States that are trying to junk pain treatment and saying that opioids and pain treatment aren't needed. But the good aspect is you do have some physicians, some groups, patients are coming out of the closet, and so are families, and we're getting organized politically, but we've got an awful long ways to go. But we do have some new agents and some new treatment approaches. So that's kind of my summary for the day. I'm certainly be glad to take questions or answer anything that's on your mind.
Well, are the doctors that you suggested about to do these new treatments besides opioids, are they educated and trained to do these other treatments?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The first training that's been officially done has occurred in this recent weeks. We had, at this Pain Week, which just concluded. Now, Pain Week is the big national meeting that's held in September each year in Las Vegas. That was the first time ever that a course was presented on treating the underlying cause of pain, which is the neuroinflammation. And I gave that course, and that's the first time nationally that we've ever had an approach like that. Okay? So this just happened in the last month. On another one of the courses out of Pain Week, we had 84 doctors and nurse practitioners sign up to try to get more advanced training on how to do these things. And so we have interest by the medical people, by doctors and nurse practitioners all over the country. It's just that we have no mechanism to train them. And let me be real clear about one thing. The professional pain organizations, your hospitals, and all that don't want to train them.
If things don't change, what does the future look like for people with chronic pain?
I think that their future is really going to depend on how rapidly we can get the word out to have them get active and start letting their state medical boards know that they're not being treated. They've got to let their insurance companies know that we're not buying this rhetoric, that we don't need these medications. They're going to have to start, at this point, trying to work on Congress or big media isn't going to cut it. We need in each state right now families and patients going right directly to their medical boards. They're the ones who have the control, and directly to their insurance companies demanding that they start understanding that everybody's not a drug addict, everybody's not abusing medication, people do use it responsibly, and that they do work. And they also need to go to their physicians and say, look, we understand that you can't prescribe over 90 milligrams of morphine a day anymore. In other words, give the doctor a break. Don't ask that doctor to exceed those guidelines today. Okay? And get what you can, but then start trying to use these other newer treatments. So the future could be good, but it really depends on whether we reverse the approach. In this country, we've developed an erroneous belief on how to get things done. I'm talking in general terms now. Everybody thinks the way to get things done is go to the Congress of the United States or to your governor or somebody like that, but the controlling parties are your medical boards in the states and your insurance companies, at least in the short term, and your local doctors. And what you can't ask today is to ask your local doctors to exceed the CDC guidelines. They can't exceed those because now malpractice carriers don't want to cover that. Pharmacies don't want to stock the medication. Insurance companies won't pay for those medications. So one of the messages that I have out there is to doctors and everybody else, at least just try to stay within the guidelines and then try to start understanding about neuroinflammation, neurohormones, protocols for neuroinflammation, non-opioid pain relievers. In other words, it's a big task, but I'm afraid if we don't go down that path, that we're going to have far more suicides, far more deaths, far more tragedy. So I don't think we can depend on the president or the media, the American Medical Association, the American Hospital Association, or anyone else to help us. I think we have to put the pressure on the pressure points that count in the short term. Now, later on, Congress can do some things. The American Medical Association can do some things. The pharmaceutical companies can do some things. But right now, we need to apply pressure to state medical boards and to our own local physicians and to our insurance companies that we've got a problem and we want their help and we demand their help.
Well, what advice do you have for our listeners listening in tonight?
And what they should do? It depends on where they live and who their doctors are. If you're talking about the patients who have lost family members or people who cannot get the help they think they need, my advice is first off, try to find physicians in your community who will at least prescribe within the CDC guidelines. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's my first bit of advice. Don't try to find someone who's going to go above those guidelines because you're going to find it very difficult, if not impossible. So my first advice is talk to your doctors and say, look, can you please prescribe opioids within the guidelines? And then can I bring to you some ideas that I'm reading about or hearing about to supplement those guidelines? That's the first thing I think that patients in the United States need to do today. That's not a pleasant message. It's not what they want to hear. I know what everybody wants to hear. Here's a magic bullet to let me go back taking the drugs I was able to get 18 months ago. I don't think that's realistic. The only state that has held true to trying to treat people well is California. Practically all the other states, it's getting very, very difficult to get medication. Now, here in California, where I reside, yes, we have a pain patient bill of rights. We have a long-standing history. We have a medical board that is reasonable. And so we have a lot of things going here in our particular state. But when I cross the state lines and go into the states just around me, I'm appalled. I'm shocked at the attitudes, the greed. Totally shocked. But, so that's my best advice. Okay? Find physicians who will at least prescribe within the CDC guidelines.
What about
don't ask them to go more.
What about the ones that are already taken off right now and in horrible pain? What should they do?
Again, get what they can get. Get doctors who will prescribe to them enough opioids within the guidelines. And then they're going to have to start trying to get other medications to supplement. They're going to have to learn about oxytocin, and they're going to have to learn about ketamine. They're going to have to learn about neurohormones. They're going to have to learn about taking an injection of ketorolac every week. They're going to have to learn what options they have to stay comfortable with what opioids are available. Now, this is a message that I realize is not one they want to hear, or it's not one that is pleasant. I'm all aware of that. But I also think it's the only practical way out at this point. There is no medication to totally substitute for the opioids. Let's get that straight. This idea that marijuana or Suboxone will substitute for somebody who's been used to getting 300 or 500 or 1,000 milligrams of morphine equivalents a day is just not going to happen. So you want to find physicians who will at least give you what they can legally and ethically do with those guidelines. Those guidelines have become rock solid. They are a ceiling for most doctors. I must tell you, I'm in California. I can go above those guidelines, and I'm a specialist. I can do that, and I'm doing it. I've got trainees in my facility today, but I'm in one state, and we have a huge waiting list. So you're going to have to try within your states to get help, but try immediately to find a doctor who will at least work with you within those guidelines. That's the only practical way to try not to commit suicide or die of adrenal failure or cardiac failure. So that's where I see one has to go. Okay.
Do you have any last words you'd like to share? Because we have a lot of advocates, chronic pain patients, and loved ones here of family members that have passed away either due to suicide or to body failure because of the pain. Would you like to say anything to them?
Yes. First off, if you've lost someone, you know the agony, you know the heartache, you know the facts. We need you. We need you to tell your stories. We're starting to get a lot of pretty good organizations, websites, blogs, where we can tell stories. And don't think you're just speaking to the choir. The more people we can have who are starting to tell their story of what happened. Now, let me tell you what I really want any family or patient to do that's been harmed. And that is write your state medical board. I am shocked that the American public, in the main, and pain patients and families in particular, did not realize that the power over doctors is their state medical board. I've talked to dozens and dozens of pain patients, and none of them have even been told how that the state medical board is calling the shots. And the state medical boards need to be told, need to hear the story. And let me put one little nuance about communication. Those don't tell patients, anytime you write a letter to your congressman or the medical board or your insurance company, don't tell them you're a chronic pain patient. Give them your underlying diagnosis. You say, I have adhesive arachnoiditis, and I have to take these kinds of medications. Or I have reflex sympathetic dystrophy and have to take these kinds of medications. Or that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have to take these kinds of medications. But tell them what your disease is and that the medication is needed because you have this disease. Today, if you write most state assemblymen or senators or your congressmen and tell them that you're a chronic pain patient and can't get medication, it has been drilled into their heads by the media that you're a drug addict. I mean, this week alone, you've got on the Today Show, they're talking about all the overdoses. And they're giving the impression in big media these days that if you're a pain patient, you're really a drug addict, and that any doctor who prescribes to you is a bum. And so we have to start trying to attack this by giving them our true stories. I'm appalled at how few pain patients and families have contacted their state medical board and told them their tragedy. That's our first step, and you can't stop it. You can't do it just one time. We're in this for the long haul. You've got people out there in the hospitals, among the physicians and nurses, among congressmen and high-level people who want pain treatment stopped, and they don't care whether pain patients are dying. I'll be honest about it. Some of the attitudes that I've heard are just appalling. They're just appalling. And I would like to make one last recommendation, if I might. I am also appalled that in the year 2013, I believe February, the United Nations, with its General Assembly, adopted a statement that says that undertreated pain is cruel and inhumane and tantamount to torture. Every pain patient and family needs to send that United Nations statement on undertreated pain as being torture to everybody we can. Think about something. I will bet you that there's hardly a person who's listening to this show had ever seen the 2013 Declaration of the United Nations about untreated pain being the same as torture. So that's where we start. It is torture. From a medical point of view, if you don't treat pain, your heart's going to fail, you're going to get a stroke, your adrenal gland is going to fail, and you're going to die of cardiac adrenal failure. And that's just the way it's going to happen, because serious pain is a serious illness, and we've got too many people trying to say it's not. And I hate to say it, I truly believe we have parties in the United States who don't care if the pain patients die. I even don't think they care if some of the veterans die. This is tough message. This is ugly messages. But we've got to face the facts if we're going to fight this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tennant, for coming on this evening with us, and I really appreciate you coming here and speaking to us about, what you know and what we all need to know. Thank you.
You're sure welcome. Good luck, and God bless you.
Lana, welcome to Conspiracies Against Wellness and to tonight's vigil. Can you please say your whole name and tell me the story about your niece?
Sure. My name's Lana Kirby, and I currently live in Florida. I'm a medically retired personal injury paralegal, and I spent my last 5 years at the U.S. District Court. Once we moved from Indianapolis to Florida, was when I became aware of the fact that we did have something going on in this country with pain patients and medication, and that's when I began my investigation and decided to become an advocate. Basically, due to my background as a paralegal, I felt like this was just so unjust and incredibly hurtful to people that I decided to become involved in advocacy.
Please tell me
why you're here tonight and what happened.
Yes, I'm here tonight because we had an episode in July that has changed a lot of lives forever. On July 24th, Denise had gone to visit her boyfriend, and as she was leaving, she went to put something in the car, and she felt a terribly painful ripping sensation in her abdomen. Denise has 2 blood clotting disorders. They are commonly referred to as factor 2 and factor 5. So she has to take anticoagulants or blood thinners all the time. She had already had a blood clot to form in her right leg and had it amputated below the knee. She immediately called 911 and was taken to the hospital by ambulance this night when she knew the pain was so severe that something had to be terribly wrong. When she arrived at the hospital, the first thing that was pulled up was the electronic medical records, which did show that she had been a heroin addict 3 years earlier, but she had been clean since that time, and there was never any indication in any of the medical records that really played a part in it, but that was the first thing that the medical personnel picked up on. So that hospital did some blood work, did a CAT scan, and sent her home with instructions stating that it was a bruise. And at the very end of that emergency room visit, Denise knew that, nothing was getting done by what she knew was something that was terribly wrong. She asked for a crisis counselor. And I think that was probably a pretty reasonable thing for her to do because in her opinion and in reality, she was in a crisis. The hospital, rather than actually getting her a crisis counselor at that time, referred her to a state-funded drug and rehab facility just outside of Indianapolis and told her to go see them in the next day or so. She stayed home for a day and a half, and she was miserable. She didn't know what to do. She knew that something was terribly wrong, and she did call the number of a hematologist whose phone number had been given to her at emergency room number 2, and that hematologist looked at the same records that the emergency room doctor looked at and determined that she had a pool of blood in her stomach that was 20 centimeters by 6.5 by 4.6. So either the radiologist at that emergency room didn't read it right, or the emergency room doctor just didn't note the significance of someone with 2 blood clotting disorders being in the emergency room with abdominal bleeding. She was sent by ambulance to the same hospital, and they immediately started blood transfusions, and she had to be put into almost like a drug-induced coma for the next week. At that point, they at least did discontinue the blood thinners, and it took the abdominal bleeding 4 days to stop. She did form a clot in her remaining leg, and she was taken to surgery the second day in the hospital, and that clot was removed. However, the next day when they did a CAT scan, that same clot was back. So it was determined right then that as soon as the abdominal bleeding stopped, they would amputate her leg. When we got the medical records, it just was very, very clear to us that because of the way things are right now with the whole war against heroin or whatever
opiates
people want to call it. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was never any indication that she had been going to emergency rooms trying to get pain medication, or that she had even been on any pain medication.
If someone is listening in from the state or someone's listening tonight that can change what happened to Denise, and so it wouldn't happen to somebody else, what do you have to say to this person listening?
So I think that education would be the first thing, where in the last several years we've kind of run this gamut of media exposure and inaccurate statistics and inaccurate information. We're even teaching these in continuing medical education classes for doctors and first responders. That's all got to be changed because they've just really eliminated pain as a significant symptom, and they are focusing way too much on, in every situation, going in thinking that it's drug-related somehow or related to drug abuse in some fashion.
How does this make you feel that this happened to Denise?
It makes me angry to the point of really wanting now to step up to the plate and not worry about who I offend or what people think of me, but it makes me willing to step up and tell it like it is.
What would you like to say to everybody tonight that is a part of our vigil?
The biggest thing, I think, is try to have an advocate with you who knows and try to be familiar with some of your rights as far as asking questions about what they're doing and asking if there are alternative ways of handling things. And because I look at Denise's situation and I think about it, and I think about what happened to her at that drug rehab and mental health facility where she went for depression and pain. But it's just that when you go in by yourself, you really are kind of at the mercy of whatever they tell you. And especially if you're in a situation where you're in so much pain or unable to really make good decisions on your own, that advocate is standing back, taking this all in, able to maybe even see or make verbal connection with someone who will help or just to insist that things be done another way. You have that right. Two sets of ears are better than one. And
when somebody's going through that, it's very hard to advocate for yourself. You know what I mean?
I mean, absolutely. And I think that any of us at any given time are vulnerable enough that our bodies can put us in a situation where we can no longer speak up for ourselves, or if the situation becomes so horrific that you're in, some type of PTSD, then if Denise would have had an advocate with her during those 3 emergency room visits, she would have that other leg today. I'm sure of it. Regardless of what people might tell you or regardless of what the medical personnel might act like, for you to have someone else with you, it's your absolute right, and you should exercise that right.
Well, Lana, thank you so much for joining us this evening for the vigil and for sharing Denise's story. And, many prayers and blessings go out to her. I hope she's able to come out on this. And again, just thank you for being here tonight and sharing this with us. Welcome to the vigil this evening. Please tell me your name and if you are here for yourself or someone else.
My name is Suzanne Stewart, and I'm here for myself and everyone in the chronic pain community.
Why are you here tonight speaking out at this vigil?
Well, I've lost several friends. More are dying every day due to the lack of access to their medications and to these illnesses, and doctors are leaving in droves, and I have to do something about it.
What changes are needed so this doesn't continue happening?
People need to not just cry and be sad and scared, and even if they're in their bed, they can do something. Everyone can contribute. They can make phone calls. They can do Skype or video chats or send videos or letters and into the House of Representatives in their states and the federal government and all the different people, the governors and senators. And if they can go and visit them, make appointments, they all cannot turn you down to see you. Only a couple, I think governors can turn you down, but anyone else can't.
Who should be held accountable for this issue?
I believe that some of the people get sucked in because they hear the word, opioid and phobia. It's like opioid phobia all of a sudden. And I think that these doctors or people that run treatment centers, like addiction specialists and psychiatrists that are not chronic pain doctors, they're not trained in chronic pain, are taking over trying to tell other people and get the CDC and the FDA and people to listen to them. And they want money. They want treatment center money, and that's what I think.
What advice do you have for others listening in tonight?
I guess I would tell everybody that things happen in numbers, and you can still, we can't do everything alone, but you can still do something alone. And if, try to do what you can as far as writing letters by yourself or asking for help, people like myself, and there's several other people that can help you write letters if you need help. Or there's groups, and just, things happen in numbers. When many, many people do something, their voice is heard, and that's what we're trying to do.
What would you like to say to the person listening, if they're like the head of state or the president? What do you want them to know?
I would like them to know that everything you hear or see is not always true or what it always appears to be, and that addiction and dependency are totally different things. And when I talked to a senator last year, she told me that she did not know the difference between those two things. She thought it was just all one thing. And when people say the opiate crisis, they think that it's people dying from opiate drugs, and most of the time it's illicit drugs mixed with opiates. They're mixing up all the numbers, and they need to know the difference, that dependency is just your body is used to something, like people that take insulin for diabetes or high blood pressure medicine. If they stop taking that, they can get sick. They could even die. If you take heart medicine and you stop taking it, suddenly you can die. So just the same thing with people who are dependent on opiates. And if addiction is totally different. You crave it. You think about it. You get high. You can't wait till your next high. We don't even want to take the medicine. We don't think about the next time we're going to take our medicine. Things like that. There's a big difference. That's all. And they need to know that. They need to know people are dying.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. What does this vigil mean to you?
It means so much. I've been trying to post about it a lot and put stuff up. I have a picture. If everyone could even take a picture of their own candle burning in their home tonight so that we can join together on Facebook, social media, and put it on your own page. You can put it on the Gone But Not Forgotten Friends and Family page on Facebook. That's my page. You can put it on other groups and things. Just post the pictures of the candles and watch your video and your candle vigil and say prayers for the people that need help. In fact, I found out that one of our vets got cut off his drugs, his medications. He is going to be in trouble. And he's one of the people that have been really fighting with us, and I'm really worried about him. And we need to pray for these people and think about them. And if you're just whatever your higher power is, just try to reach that this evening while you have the candle going, and try to think about these people. Give them your thoughts and prayers.
What last words would you like to share with everyone joining us tonight at this online virtual vigil?
I guess I would say, please ask if you don't know. Anything you want to know, ask me, ask Janelle, ask Dr. Lawhern, ask any of the people that are talking with you tonight. We can all help. If you have a question, there are many people that are working on this, and we need your help. We need numbers. We need lots of people. And like I said, even if you're in your bed and you cannot go out, we can use your help for just typing something or calling. So please help us help you.
Thank you, Suzanne, for joining us this evening. And I also wanted to say a big thank you for signing for us today that we put up on social media. You signed for us. If you'd like to talk a little bit about that.
I just know that there's probably deaf people. I'm sure there's deaf people. I know there's deaf people because I'm friends with them that have pain problems, and they're not finding out the same information that we have because they don't have access to the same information sometimes. And so, this is good. We have a little infomercial to tell people to go to your site. And, if anyone needs more information, I can help them. I used to be a sign language interpreter, which I can't do that anymore, but I still am fluent in the language. And I'm hard of hearing now and have 2 hearing aids. So I am very much in the deaf community. So I want them to have access to this information, too, because it's a shame if they're going to their doctors and they're in pain and they're losing their medicine. They need to know what's going on, and I'm sure that they'll want to help, too. There's a whole community out there.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Good evening and welcome to the Vigil. Can you please tell me your name and if you're here for yourself or someone else?
My name is Lindsey Jellum. I'm here for myself and for my father, David Jellum.
Why are you here tonight speaking out at this vigil?
I'm here to raise awareness regarding the opioid crisis for chronic pain patients, and I'm also here for my father that died due to suicide and also that resulted from chronic pain.
Would you like to talk a little bit about your situation and your father's situation?
Well, I'm a chronic pain patient myself. I was in a car accident when I was 21 years old, and my father was a chronic pain patient also. He was a contractor for a little over 30 years. He fell off a work bridge in 2008, and he had 2 failed back surgeries. And after dealing with that, he also had his opiates taken away, and he was forced to suicide, unfortunately. And after dealing with insurance companies and physicians that no longer would prescribe opiates, and so that was very hard to deal with.
I'm so sorry for your loss. Could you tell me a little bit about your situation?
Well, I have several different ailments, unfortunately, that have been chronic since 2001, like I said. And now I live in a real rural area, and I'm no longer treated at all with any type of medication. And that's been since January of this year. And so I've been living with actually really no quality of life. And so I want to try and do something to change that. That's why I'm trying to speak out for this.
What changes are needed so this doesn't happen to other people? What changes do you see that are needed?
Well, there definitely has to be some changes to the CDC and the FDA guidelines. Also, we need to try and see if we can't get some of our government officials to see some changes. And then also if we can see the climate and the opiate outlook on chronic pain patients to see that we're not addicts, that we're treated like normal people, and then also that the suicide rate among chronic pain patients is rising due to the fact that our medications are being taken away or drastically cut. Those definitely need to be changed.
Who do you hold accountable for what happened with your father and what's happening to you?
Well, I definitely believe that government officials, the FDA, the CDC, and insurance companies, and also some healthcare providers should be held accountable. These people are supposed to be in positions to help people and to do no harm. And they are looking at false statistics and continually letting people suffer, which are leading to suicides, and people are suffering and they're in pain, and they're turning to street drugs or different things that they would have never done in the past. And it's just a terrible thing that's happening. Right now, my quality of life is absolutely terrible. And, you know, basically with my father, he didn't see a quality or a quantity of life. And it's absolutely awful. I don't want to see that any other family has to see a fallout for that.
What would you like to say to all of our audience tonight listening in? What advice do you have for them, or suggestions?
Well, definitely to the chronic pain patients. I know that just back in January, when unfortunately I had to go through withdrawals and different things like that, I didn't even know that there were all these wonderful pain groups and different things on Facebook, and that there are people out there that can help you, and that please look to different advocates and different people, that there's help out there and different people to turn to, and that suicide is not the answer, that people are there to help you. And just as my experience, it's so hard for the family around you. And I just want to say that I know going through pain is absolutely difficult and it's so hard, but there are people out there that care, and that, you know, I know it's tough in just my own experience. And, you know, I just want to say that, you know, there are people that care, and you know, that's just, I guess, my look on it. And just to know, you know, this is so wonderful for Doug tonight, and I really want people to know that there are people that care out there, and also that all of us chronic pain patients need to band together and really make some changes tonight, because there are people out there suffering, and if we can make some changes, then that's what I'd really love to see.
What would you say if somebody's listening in that can make these changes happen? What would you like to say to them?
I just like to say that people are suffering, and the statistics that people are looking at, we're not addicts. We need our medications. And if you can see what a chronic pain patient goes through every day, and the doctor's appointments and the stigmas and the different things that are being put on chronic pain patients are not the truth, that we're not addicts and we're not heroin users. We need our medications to live and to have a quality of life. I was a chronic pain patient for 17 years. I never misused my medication. You know, we need to be looked at as individuals and not as a group of addicts.
Right. What last words would you like to share with everyone that's joining us tonight at this online vigil?
I just like to say that, you know, I appreciate you guys for listening, and then to these officials and to the people at the FDA and the CDC, and that you guys, please, you just need to listen, that there's people out there suffering. If you do get a chance to look at some of these things on social media and on YouTube and on different things like that, that people are individuals, and you need to look at the different things that people post and medications, and you've got to get a different outlook on things, that it's not cookie cutter medication, and that people are dying out there of fentanyl and morphine overdoses. They're not dying because of medications that are being given to chronic pain patients. And these guidelines need to be changed. They need to be looked at. Rural healthcare needs to be changed. There has to be something done, and if not, there's going to be more suicides. There's not going to be any quality of life for chronic pain patients. My whole family dynamic has been changed by this. and I don't want to see anybody else go through it. It's absolutely awful. And I thank everybody for their time and for listening to this.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm so sorry that you're going through what you're going through. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us this evening.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hello, this is Dr. Thomas Kline. I am a chronic disease specialist in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've had 42 years experience with long-term illness and even an occasional sore throat. I was trained at Stanford and Harvard and went to medical school at the University of Maryland.
Thank you for joining us this evening, Dr. Kline. So why are you here speaking tonight at this vigil?
The problem that I would like to address is the new crisis. There is an opioid pain refugee crisis, much worse than the crisis we read about in the newspapers.
And what crisis is this? What's the difference between them?
The opioid crisis is a fabricated crisis of overdose deaths and addiction, which the data does not support. This is the first time in the history of the war on drugs that started with Eisenhower, went to Nixon, went to Reagan, went to George Bush Jr., and now our current president. Each time there's been a war, nothing much has happened except expenditure of a lot of money. This time something new has happened. People are being tossed out of offices for fear if they continue their opiate pain medication, they'll become addicts and die of an overdose. This is not true. People who are already on their pain medicines will never addict. But the fear has caused physicians, supported by the DEA raids, to now stop prescribing opiates. This has led to 2/3 of 9 million people who need opiates every day for their pain to be out looking for new doctors. They have been abandoned and they're on the streets.
What changes are needed so this doesn't continue, and can they be made?
Changes need to be made at the CDC. They need to confess that their 90 milligram cutoff was fabricated. The DEA needs to stop raiding doctors' offices when all they need are copies of medical records. They could do that with a letter as well. And the third step is doctors need to get back into the ballgame. They need to understand the DEA is not going to be raiding them for practicing medicine. Doctors need to have incentives to see pain patients, and we are suggesting that CMS develop a special incentive program to develop certificates of chronic pain that people can take around and show pharmacists and show other doctors that they've already been screened and they have a particular disease and they need to have long-term opiates.
What advice can you give to those that are dealing with this right now on what they can or should do?
What people can do right now is use a loophole in the state laws and the CDC regulations. If you have palliation, none of the rules apply. Palliation means we as doctors are treating someone for comfort. We are not curing. So if you have a situation like most people do with their chronic pain diseases where you cannot cure the disease, the treatment with opiates is palliative. Palliative is not just end of life. That's a misconception. palliation is the treatment of any disease you cannot cure. You can talk to your physicians about that if they document in the chart that they are treating you for palliative reasons and write palliation on a prescription that they give you. They can prescribe anything they want.
So does this have to, this fear of the guidelines that the CDC has set up, do you believe that most doctors are following, they're taking these guidelines and instead changing them as into that these are the rules? What is going on with that?
Absolutely. The CDC guidelines are voluntary, which is only mentioned once in their 58 single-spaced pages. Then when the DEA started to increase its number of raids, in some states up 4 times, for records only, the physicians put the two together. Here's the new rules, and if we don't do it, I'm going to lose my practice. And remember, it takes us 11 years to get to the point of starting our businesses, and many years after that to establish the business. So this is a fear much worse than prison.
Are you funded by anyone of why you're coming out and saying this and doing this?
Just my wife. No, I'm funded by no one. The last time I took something from anyone, it was 1976. I took a pencil from Upjohn. I'm an independent physician, and I'm concerned because I did not want the government sitting in my examining room telling me how much pain medicine I could give somebody, and that's why I'm doing this.
What can you say to doctors that are listening in this evening on what they can do to help the situation or learn about it more? Do they need to learn about it? Do they understand it?
I think physicians need to, first of all, use the palliative loophole and start treating people and bringing them back into the practices. There's 6 million people out there wandering around afraid of what it's like to have their pain return. These are real pain issues. There are 30 or more diseases that have serious pain, most of them involving joints. But I think physicians need to show a little courage, too. And I am now seeing some patients who are opioid refugees, and that's all I'm seeing. So I'm going to be a DEA screening target. But the legislators need to hear from doctors, just individually. Call them up. Say, I don't agree with this. CDC's 90 milligram cutoff does not only make no sense, it was fabricated. If you read the regulations, the 2 references they had to support the 90 milligram cutoff are phony. They do not even pertain to the cutoff. It was clearly fabricated. And physicians need to let their legislators know, just like our pain patients need to let the legislators know. And if legislators hear from both, they're going to start paying attention.
What are you doing to make these changes for pain patients, for all those people that have passed due to this?
Well, I started a Twitter feed 6 months ago, and so I have a virtual practice now of 12,000 people that can provide me with information on how I can go about reversing the course of this wildfire that was ignited by a very small group of physicians, a fringe group of physicians who believe that pain can just be dealt with by a Tai Chi or thinking about it, and therefore pain medicines are way too dangerous to use since they don't work in the first place. That is a Neanderthal approach to the treatment of pain.
What last words would you like to share with everyone joining us tonight on this online virtual vigil?
There's a nice video that people can watch about the civil rights movement because the exact same thing is happening now. There's discrimination, gross discrimination against people in pain, and the video is called Hang On.
Did you have any last words for everyone?
No, but people need to know that there are people working 24 hours a day on this. So hang on.
Thank you, Dr. Kline, for joining us this evening, and we really appreciate you coming on and saying what you had to say.
Thanks for asking me.
Good evening and welcome to the vigil this evening. Can you please tell me your name and if you're here for yourself or someone else?
My name is Mike, and I'm here for myself. And I'm also here to remember my good friend and fellow chronic pain patient, Doug Hale.
Okay. Why are you here tonight speaking out at this vigil?
As a person who receives opiate pain medication from my primary care physician, I fear that my medication will be discontinued just like Doug's was. In fact, my physician did say he would not risk losing his license by prescribing this medication to me, and that I had to strictly follow his pain medication contract, an agreement that, frankly, is made too easily to fail than succeed. And I feel that if primary care physicians are going to continue prescribing opiate pain medications to their patients, there needs to be changes made to the general opinion to this issue.
What changes are needed so this doesn't happen to you, or so this doesn't keep happening to others?
Well, I feel like that the CDC guidelines need to be rewritten by individuals who are well-versed in pain management and in opiate medication management, so there's no bias against those who have chronic pain and require high-dose opiate pain medication. These guidelines should be fair to all, including those who have chronic pain, those who have issues with addiction, anyone that, requires this type of assistance. Individuals need to be treated appropriately so they can have fair and adequate health care. The CDC needs to understand and needs to make it known that there's a difference between patients who have chronic pain and then that require daily pain medication, and those who use opiate medication but don't have chronic pain and that use recreationally, and those are those that are addicted. Too many physicians are lumping chronic pain patients with addicts, and this in itself makes others discriminate against chronic pain patients, and then ultimately make the physician want to wean or discontinue because they don't want to risk their medical license by prescribing to a patient that they feel is an addict or could become a person having an issue with this medication.
Who should be held accountable for someone like Doug's death or the people that are being taken off their opiate pain medication?
Now, I believe that the individual who prescribes and then who's not following through, should be ultimately be held accountable. If the primary care physician is prescribing high-dose opiate medication and then, for instance, doesn't, educate himself on the benefits of long-term pain management and then decides to wean or remove this patient off of the medication without support, this physician should be held accountable. I also feel the CDC should be accountable because of these guidelines. They make it more difficult for physicians to prescribe appropriately. And so I think both should really be held accountable.
What advice do you have for others listening in tonight?
I think that everyone should remember to, advocate for yourself and for other chronic pain patients by speaking up. Join support groups. Tell your story to others and make it clear that, there are thousands of chronic pain patients throughout the world that need fair and appropriate treatment. Write to your congressman and tell him your personal story. Explain to them how the CDC guidelines have affected your life. We need to stand up together and educate others about the seriousness of this and how their voices need to be heard. We need to have these guidelines rewritten, so there's less complication and physicians feel more comfortable prescribing and really, again, I feel advocating for yourself and speaking up is very important.
What would you like to say to the person listening in tonight from like the heads of states or the people that can actually make these changes?
If there are any congressmen or statespersons listening to the show tonight, I would implore them to listen to our voices and our concerns and do what it takes to make these CDC guidelines fair for everyone. I would insist that these representatives continue educating themselves with the real true facts of this issue, and to have continued conversations with pain management specialists, chronic pain specialists, and then, of course, continue listening to our stories. So when it's time to start rewriting these guidelines, it's done with the chronic pain patient in mind. It's done so these complications are no longer having to be, so we're no longer having to have these issues within these guidelines. If these guidelines are going to exist, at least, they will exist with us in mind and will provide, fair and respectful guidelines for everyone.
What does this vigil mean to you?
This vigil is really important to me because being a chronic pain patient for as many years as I've been, there's been just too much suffering. There's been, so many people have gone through so much pain and suffering with this disease. Doug, for example, he went through such a horrible, horrible situation that he ultimately chose to do what he did because it was such a difficult life to lead. And I really think that it's important that this changes. There's been too many deaths involved. Too many people are giving up. We really need to stand up and make our voices heard, and because this is not going away. We're not going away, and these diseases are not going away, and there's only going to be more and more people in this world who will develop a chronic pain issue.
What last words would you like to share with everyone joining us tonight at this online vigil?
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining the vigil tonight that's in memory of Doug. You know, I remind myself every day that if things were different, Doug would probably still be with us today. If Doug's primary care physician wasn't so threatened by the DEA, you know, he may not have treated Doug the way he did. And so we need to continue to speak up for those that can't speak up for themselves and advocate for fair and humane rights for people who have chronic pain disease.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I appreciate you, sharing your story a bit. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can you please tell me your name and why you're here? Or are you here for someone else?
My name is Meredith Lawrence, and I'm actually here for my husband, Jay.
And why are you here tonight speaking at this vigil?
I'm here tonight. I want to honor the memory of my husband, Jay. He was a chronic pain patient who died of suicide on March 2nd of this year.
Can you give us a little summary of what exactly happened to him?
Jay's pain began with a car accident in the early 90s. He was never truly treated, and by 2007, the nerve damage was so extensive that even after 3 back fusions, it did not do a whole lot of good for him. He was treated by 2 pain specialists, and he always did what they told him to do. He went through epidurals and steroid shots, nerve blocks, all the different kinds of medications. Throughout the time that he was going through all of this, he suffered from depression that's really common with chronic pain patients. For him, it was depression that came around not being the breadwinner and the provider in our family. And it was the depression that came from being so limited in just the normal daily things that most of us take for granted. Things like going to the movies, things like being able to drive a car, or even take a shower when I wasn't home. He was seen by a psychiatrist, and she sent him back to his primary care doctor, and she put him on 2 milligrams of Xanax to sleep at night. And the pain clinic that he was seeing was aware that he was on Xanax. They kept him on a pretty steady dose of morphine. It was 120 milligrams of immediate release daily. And he'd been on that for well over a year. And he kind of started to come out of the depression. He was starting to kind of find a balance with the new normal that we had. But on February 3rd, that kind of came crashing down around him. And his PA, when we went in to get his prescriptions that day, announced that as a clinic-wide, they were reducing medications on all of their pain patients. And for him, what that meant was he was going to go from 120 milligrams, something that he at least had a little bit of a life on. They were going to take him down to 45, and we're going to try to get him down to 30. And when they told me that's what they were doing to him, the look in his face was just sheer panic. And when we got to the car, the first thing he said to me was, "I won't live like this." And I kept just reassuring him all weekend, it's a mistake. There's no way they can do this. It doesn't make any sense. It's got to be a mistake. When we went in and saw the doctor on Monday, we found that it was definitely not a mistake. They had, as a practice, they had decided that based on the CDC guidelines, based on the Tennessee chronic pain guidelines that came out in January of 2017, that this was what they were going to do across the board. And looking in his eyes and the fear in Jay's eyes was tough, but the doctor's lack of concern and lack of even empathy was just awful to stomach. The doctor explained that in his mind, 95% of his patients had a condition called hyperalgesia. And the way he explained that was that the pain wasn't real. It was all in somebody's head. I begged the doctor for an option, tried to explain to him that what this would do to Jay's quality of life. And he just did not want to listen at all. he told Jay he had to make a choice. He was not going to allow him to be on the Xanax while he was on morphine. It was, even though he was not prescribing it, he felt like that was a choice that he was allowed to make. And the last thing that the doctor said will always be on my mind. He was standing with the door open, halfway in the room, halfway in the hallway. And he said, my patient's quality of life is not worth losing my practice or my license. And I know Jay just felt like the rug had been pulled out from under him. He said he felt like it was the moments, before the impact of a car crash. He knew that going down to 45 milligrams would leave him no quality of life and would limit even the ability to do something as simple as get in and out of his chair, have his recliner on a daily basis. And throughout the month of February, I know he tried to pack in a lot of very special things we didn't normally do, things like we celebrated Valentine's Day for the first time in 12 years. But he came to me in the early morning of March 2nd. He knew he had an appointment the morning of March 2nd, and early that morning, middle of the night, he came to me and he said, look, I feel like it's come down to three choices here. I can either live with the pain I'm in, I can go to street drugs, or I can end it. And I'm choosing option 3. And I'm asking you as my wife to help me with that. And what he asked me for, I did. And I went out and I purchased the gun. And I sat with him in the park and I held his hand when he ended his life. And I knew before I bought the gun that I was going to be charged, and I was. And my charge was later reduced from assisted suicide to reckless endangerment. But it's still there. And I just want people to be aware that the guidelines and the way that the doctors are twisting these guidelines are absolutely killing people. Jay was, quote unquote, a model pain patient. He did everything they asked him. He never failed a UA. He never had a problem with pill counts. Even when he didn't want to do something like a nerve block or a steroid injection, he let him do that because he was afraid that if he didn't, they would take his medication away. But because they twisted up these guidelines, I became a widow at 44. And I want to make sure that that doesn't happen to anybody else. And I want to make sure that people are aware that it is happening, and it is happening every day.
Who should be held accountable?
I think it's a combination of the doctors and the CDC. The CDC has put out guidelines. The states have followed suit. Tennessee followed suit. They put out their own guidelines for chronic pain patients. But the doctors have twisted them. The guidelines for the Tennessee pain management very clearly say providers have flexibility to deal with exceptional cases. So the doctors have the ability to prescribe higher doses if they feel it's necessary. But the doctors are so afraid of a lawsuit and overdose being blamed for overprescribing that the doctors are twisting these and using these as an excuse to get rid of patients.
What changes are needed so this doesn't happen again?
I think the CDC guidelines need to be revoked and completely reworked and rewritten. That's the big thing. They need to be completely thrown out and started over. And it needs to be very, very clear that patients with chronic pain conditions need to be treated the same way somebody with any other condition should be treated, that it should be an individual case-by-case basis. Nobody gets to high-dose opiates overnight. It should be handled by a pain management doctor, and that doctor should have the discretion to prescribe what they feel they need to for that patient, because over time, patients are going to develop tolerance. But if the doctors will not prescribe them because of these guidelines, then the guidelines need to be changed.
If you knew back then what you know now, would you have done anything differently?
I don't know that I would have. I feel like I fought the doctor as hard as I could. I argued with the doctor as hard as I could, and I did try to get Jay into a different pain management doctor. But Jay did not want to start over with a new doctor. He did not feel like when you start with a new doctor, you start at the beginning. You start with the nerve blocks, the steroid shots, the epidurals, all the things he'd already gone through. And he just did not feel like he wanted to do that. I don't know that there was much more that I could have done differently.
advice do you have for others that are listening in tonight or at the vigil?
The advice I would have is that we need to gather together. For the first 6 months when I was in just the fog of grief, I felt like I was by myself in this, and I was not aware there were other people. And I think as a group, we need to gather together and make sure our voice is heard. And our legislators and our politicians need to hear our stories and need to know that this is what's happening to real people. These guidelines are absolutely a fail, and they need to know that.
Say there's a person listening in right now, like the President of the United States. What would you like him to know?
The thing I would like him to know is that the CDC guidelines absolutely are not winning the opiate addiction crisis. What they are doing is they are killing people that are in constant pain, people that already struggle to have a normal life. They are taking away all hope, and they are causing widows way too young, and they are causing families to lose people they love way too soon.
What does this vigil mean to you?
This vigil is a way for us to show our support for each other. It is a way for us to come together and to honor the people we've lost and to be the voice that they can't be.
Do you have any last words to share with everybody that's at this vigil tonight?
I just want people to realize they're not alone, that we're in this together, and that is how we're going to win this.
Well, I'm so sorry for your loss, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, we are back here live. I just want to thank all of our guests. Am I on? Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. Oh, so we're back here live, and I just wanted to thank you to all of our guests that came on tonight and spoke with us to talk more about, their personal experiences or how they feel about this whole issue. So if anybody would like to call in with any questions, please call in at 415-915-2291. Caller from area code 318. What's your name? Where are you from? Hello, caller from 318.
Hello, Louisiana.
Hi, what's your name?
Stephen Vasco.
Hi, Stephen.
And I'm from Coshada, Louisiana.
Great to have you. What would you like to say?
Well, I'm a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an issue with my right shoulder. I have, it had to be pieced back together and a rod inserted down my arm to my elbow. And this was from an auto accident I had in 2011. Well, the pain was pretty intense. So I went to my primary doctor there at the VA, and that's Overton Brooks in Shreveport, Louisiana. And he looked at it, and of course, he ordered x-rays. And once he got the report back, he told me they said that the hardware had come loose. Now, my blood pressure at that time was 176/97. And I had a heart attack back in like 93, something like that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he knew I was not feeling well, and I could barely move my arm. But he tells me that he's not, or he can't, prescribe pain medication.
Okay.
So he offers me, of course, a steroid shot. Mm. And you have to understand, I've been dealing with, I have scoliosis, and I have rods in my back from L45S1 to T11.
Wow.
And I've been dealing with this since I was 23 years old. Now, I've been on NSAIDs. I've been prescribed ibuprofen from my primary doctor, up 1,600 milligrams per dose, which made my ears ring. I have been through, I have done acupuncture, I've done swim therapy, I've done physical therapy. I've had 5 back surgeries total.
So what works for you?
And I have been in the pain, the chronic pain clinic, and whatnot, and I've gone through that, and it's very demeaning. You're treated horribly. You're treated like you're a criminal. But back to this, he tells me after he gives me the shot to go, if I have further problems, go to the emergency room. So I said, okay. So I went ahead and I came back home. Now, it's a 35-mile drive one way for me to get there. And I was by myself. And I use a wheelchair. And I had to get an officer at the VA to help me get my chair out. But going back, I didn't get any help except for my son. I had to wait for him for 3 hours.
I'm so sorry.
But I went back 2 days later, still in a large amount of pain. And the ER, they asked me who my primary physician was. And I told them, and said, sorry, we can't help you.
And why was that?
That's his responsibility.
Ah.
And I said, excuse me? Yeah. And I told him that he had made me, he had referred me out to an orthopedic surgeon. Mm-hmm. Because we do this, a VA hospital without orthopedic surgeon.
So what did they do?
So they did nothing. I had to leave. And
what happened next?
I ended up I ended up in the emergency room of the local hospital. And they had to, of course, do more X-rays because they wanted their own. And it was at the hospital where the surgeon who pieced my shoulder back together worked out of. And, they took care of me somewhat. They prescribed a very small amount, with, fine, until I can get a appointment in there to see him. I was hoping, because he told me, I needed to go see him.
Right. So,
and
so what's been going on since then? Whatever happened? Did you go get surgery? What happened?
No, this is all recent.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this is just this past week.
And you don't have to go to a pain management doctor or anything like that?
I haven't gone. I terminated my last doctor because of his attitude towards me, and because, I was asked 3 times why I used the wheelchair.
I have a question for you. What do you think do you think vets are treated properly in the medical institutions or with doctors? Do you guys get good care?
For the most part, you do, but, if you have to go out, if you're referred out, you have to use a company called TriWest or Choice. They have to make the appointment for you. You can't make the appointment yourself.
That's right, because they have to get the doctors they want in.
Well, no, I was able to choose my own, but it's, I'm having to wait for them to make the appointment so that it's covered. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So I've been waiting. Well, they called me tonight, and I was on hold. I was in the queue. I was waiting for somebody to talk to me and tell me about, how to set up the appointment. And 4 minutes into my wait, they disconnected me.
Oh, no.
Well,
that's frustrating. So I have a question. What do you think about tonight? What did you think about what you heard tonight?
It's devastating. I know how they all feel. I'm in the same position. I've gotten no care for about over 2 years now, and my life, of course, is. I can barely do anything. I live alone, so yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that. This isn't an easy thing to do.
Oh no, but as far as like the one gentleman was, I talked to a nurse of the surgeon that I wanted. And she profiled me right over the phone, and pretty much, just blew off what trouble I was having. So I can't see him until Monday.
I'm so sorry.
I can't see him until Monday, and when I told her, she asked me what medications that the emergency room doctor gave me, which she should have had right there in front of her. And I looked them off, and as soon as I said prednisone, well, that should take care of it. That should make it stop hurting. And I said, well, excuse me, but that is not correct. See, because I have osteoporosis in my spine, my hips, and my pelvis. I have osteopenia in the rest of my bones. Steroids are detrimental to me. This is because I have taken so many over the years. That's what has been pushed at me over and over and over again. And they tear your bones up and other issues.
Yep.
But, she did not know this. I said, well, it's a fact.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. Is there anything you want to say before we go? We have a ton more calls coming in, so I don't mean to cut you short.
Yes. Just let people know that I am going to be speaking out about this. And the National Pain Report is a very good report that's on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you should subscribe to because they are advocates as well. And, they get stories and they speak to doctors.
Okay. Well, actually, a few of the people that were on tonight, they're a part of that. So, and we are going to be talking and working together on that. I will be putting stuff out on social media and on the website of what we're going to be wanting to do coming up. So just look out for that because it's something that you can do and you can be a part of. And I would really like that if you'd want to do that.
Okay. Right. I'll definitely do that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. Have a great night. Caller from area code 504. What's your name and number? Or what's your name and where are you from?
Hi, my name is Audrey.
Hi, Audrey.
I'm from Louisiana.
Hi, Audrey. Hi. What would you like to comment, or do you have a question?
Well, I'm getting a little bit emotional, and I'm sorry.
No, don't be.
It's okay. This is very, very important to me. I am calling for myself. I'm calling for a support group that I run that's got about 81 people in it, and everyone else who suffers from all these terminal diseases, which I am I have degenerative disc disease. I have osteoarthritis. I have cardiovascular disease, and I'm a type 2 diabetic. And I am 60 years old. This all started for me probably back in 2009. I have had complete neck fusion from C2 all the way down to C7, two of them. I have had a lower back fusion from L2 to S1. I have had a complete knee replacement. And the lower back fusion was just 2 years ago on the 15th of this month. And it was a failed fusion, which means basically that even though I have metal and rods and screws in my back, the bone that was put in did not fuse. So I have no bone around it to help support it. I started doing my own research several years ago to try and find out what I could do to help myself. And then, of course, I have been going to...
Thank you.
I go to a pain management specialist because even though I've had these surgeries, and I want to say they've pretty much been successful because I'm still able to walk, but it's very cautiously. Before I had my neck fused back in 2010, I had lost all use of my right leg. It was literally like dragging a dead limb around. And it took a year before I could find out what was wrong. And it turned out to be the discs and everything in my neck. So the first fusion didn't work. So another doctor came in and did a complete total fusion from C2 to C7. And the next day I was walking. Of course, it took quite a while and a lot of physical therapy to get it strong enough to where I didn't need a cane or a walker. But I have done, for the last surgery, the back, I did over 6 months of physical therapy. That's including water therapy. I have tried everything. I did the shot. As a matter of fact, I'm having problems right now with the piriformis muscle and sciatic nerve on my left side, which is in the butt hip area, and the pain is way past the level 10 scale. It goes from the buttock all the way down the leg into my foot. And it comes and goes, and I couldn't tell you when I had a full night's sleep because it seems to act up mostly when I'm sleeping at night, which makes me have to get up. So I've taken the other drugs they give you, the gabapentin, which I think is deadlier than opiates. When I was on that stuff, I would wake up in the morning like a zombie, and I did not feel like myself. And I basically got off of that on my own, even though the doctors didn't recommend it. I said, I can't take this stuff. And anyway, I've been fighting pain, even though I feel like my surgeries have helped me. I have chronic pain 24/7. Yeah. I live in pain, and I'm on opiates. And I'm supposed to take 4 10-milligram Norco pills a day. And honestly, some days I do take a few more, which means I run short at the end of the month. Right. But I stay within my so-called guidelines that I'm supposed to stay in. I make sure I don't use any other drugs. I don't smoke marijuana as much as I would love to because it does help, but I don't because I need the pain medication. I need the pain management doctor.
I have a question for you. Will your doctor, have you ever told them that, this is just not working for me anymore? And
yes.
Okay. Did they say that they'd go up or no? Did they say no, this is what you could
No. He will not increase it. I told him, I said, look, 120 might sound like a lot of pills for a month. They're not, I mean.
Honestly, quite honestly, help, for what you've been through, you are on a very low dose of opiates.
I know.
Like for something that's happened, because I had 5 neck surgeries too, and I'm fused from C3 to C7, and that's not that high,
I mean, it's just, I
I've always been an outgoing person.
Yeah.
I've always been a happy person. I laugh a lot. I do things. I'm outgoing personality. It's not me anymore.
Yeah.
It's
well,
like I'm afraid to leave the house sometimes, you know?
this is the thing, though.
I miss
It's
a
like,
lot of family out functions and stuff. It's just disgusting.
Dr. Tennant, though, said
But,
tonight, like you have to make sure that you, like whatever you're getting right now, like you don't push that, and you know, you kind of, it's sad, but we have to almost be like slaves to our doctors in a way of, like,
I know.
we don't
I
want
know.
to upset them. You know
Well,
what I mean?
Let me tell you something. My doctor, my pain management doctor, is a very good one. Okay? Now, 2 weeks ago, you know, the medication he knew hasn't been helping me enough. And with the sciatic nerve and the piriformis muscle problem and all, he decided, you know, I don't like to get the injections because I've had them before in my spine, and they didn't work. And he said, look, let's give you the steroid shot. We'll put it in your hip. See how you do. So I decided, well, you know what? I don't know where else to go. So I went to the hospital as an outpatient. I got the shot. When I woke up from it, I was in so much pain, I thought I was dying.
Yeah.
So, but it gave me a shot of pain medication. By the time I left the hospital, I was feeling pretty good. I came home. The shot lasted 2 days. For 2 days, I did not have any pain. I thought, great, I'm going to be okay. Well, now, the third day, it slowly crept back. Today, I'm in just as much pain as I was before I went and had the shot.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
I know they don't work. That was less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they never worked
Less
for me
than
either.
2 weeks ago.
You know, something that did work
So
for
I-
me was stem cell injections. You might want to look into.
Yeah, but I don't know if my insurance would even cover that.
Oh, no, they won't. But what I'm saying, though,
Okay,
is
I'm on disability.
I am too. No. I'm on disability, too. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is you could get carecredit.com, and you have, like, I think it's 12 months or 18 months, I forget, to pay it off before they charge you whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I mean, but that it's worth it.
Well, I might look into that.
You should look into it.
But
It
before I
changed.
get off of here, I want to share something with you that I got from my insurance company. Okay, it's the Future Scripts is the name of the company who handles pharmacy benefits. Okay, through my insurance company. So I get a letter from them that says you're receiving this notification because our records indicate that you may have filled a prescription for a short-acting opiate. Starting November 15th, 2017, the medication you are currently receiving, which is the hydrocodone, blah, 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 will be subject to quantity limits and or a limit to two fills within a 60-day time frame. Well, I only get a script a month. Okay, then it says how this will work. Future Script is currently embarking on an initiative to curb rising tide of opiate abuse across the United States by adoption of new quantity and fill limits. If your current prescribed is greater than the maximum allowed quantity limit and or exceeds 2 refills within 60-day time frame, then your doctor will need to submit a prior authorization request to Future Scripts. You should continue taking your medication as prescribed. I just got that 2 days ago.
Wow.
So basically, you know, I get, what is it, the CDC guidelines is like, what, 90 pills? Is that it? Like 90 pills in one script? That's all they're allowing? That's their guideline suggestions? Well, I get 120 a month.
Well,
And
those
that
are
120 a month-
suggestions, though. That doesn't mean that's what
But
it has to be.
But the doctors, I know.
But if
now
they
my
follow
doctor,
it,
I have to
yeah.
admit, yeah, he's been pretty good. He hasn't been letting anything influence his, changing his prescriptions or anything yet. He's a pain management doctor. And like I said, I do get drug tested when I go in. They do make sure I'm using my medication, and they do make sure I'm not on anything else.
Right.
I'm 60 years old, you know?
They do it to everyone,
I'm a
though.
grandma.
Yeah, I know, but they do it to
I know,
everyone.
I know. And it's just that I have a support group I started for people who've had spinal cord injuries or surgeries or any kind of terminal illness that causes chronic pain. I keep it a private, closed group on Facebook. And I could tell you some stories.
I'm sure.
But I tell you what, if it wasn't for that group of women and men on there to help me get through the day, I don't know what I would do. A lot of people don't realize that your family will alienate you Your friends will leave you. They don't want to hear about your illnesses. They don't want to be around depressing people. And even though that's not us, that's how we get treated.
Yeah.
So you end up isolating yourself, and it causes depression. I refuse to be on Xanax. I refuse to be on any kind of antidepressant. Because if I wake up and I feel like a zombie, I don't want it. Opiates for me help me function. I can wake up. I can feel decent. I can take my medication. I can clean my house. I can wash my clothes. I can take a shower by myself. Mm-hmm. You know? You take it away from me, I'm going to be in bed in pain all the time. And this is why people are killing themselves. Who wants to live that way? You think I haven't thought about it? I have. But because of my faith and belief in God, I haven't done it. And my grandkids, I just won't do it. I'll suffer. But it's getting to the point with all the CDC regulations and the FDA and all the government agencies who are trying to stop and make us pain patients who suffer terminal illnesses and diseases that cannot be cured, keeping us from the one thing that helps us feel better and helps us function as a normal person. Take that away from us, and you're killing us.
Right.
They're literally causing people to die. That's what I say.
I agree with you.
You know?
Well, I really appreciate
you. Sad.
Yeah, I appreciate you calling in and sharing your story. And you know, what you just said, so many people say the same thing, you know? I think the same as you.
I mean,
so
I wish I could talk to the president. I wish I could tell him, look at me. Do I look like a drug addict? I mean, you know, I was a legal secretary. I worked for years, you know? Mm-hmm. And then
well, I just want you to
2013.
I want you to pay attention though, because I'm working with all the doctors and a group of advocates that were on tonight as guests. We're getting together, and we're going to be putting together some stuff. So I'll put it up on the website, so
please
you know you could see it, and we're going to be asking things from you, from everybody. So yes.
And the gentleman who was on before me, Stephen, I know him. He's in my group.
Oh, okay.
And that man, he has been through a lot.
Yeah,
You know, he has been through a lot, and he's a good person. You know, I just hate to see somebody who went to war for America be treated the way he's treated.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Well.
But I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, give me a second here. We have one more call. Okay. Caller from 909. What's your name and where are you from?
My name is Kathy Keene, and I'm from California.
Hi, Kathy Keene. How are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm good. What would you like to share, or do you have a question?
Wow, there's a lot I have to share. However, I don't think your show's long enough. Well, just, you know, touching on the fact that, you know, the suicides and the fact that we can't get our medications. I believe that I posted something about malabsorption, and you said, you know, Kathy, maybe I'll have you on a show, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, you know, I've been on this journey for 14 plus years, and I used to see a specialist at UCLA Hospital. He was an endocrinologist. So he knew all the ins and outs of the way my body worked, because I have really bad malabsorption to where, you know, a normal person would take one Norco. It takes me like 8 to 10. You know, I don't metabolize. It's called short gut syndrome. And so I was on very, very high doses. You know, I was on 5 80 milligram Oxycontins, 100 fentanyl patch every 2 days. Then the Norco's 120, Percocet's 90 a month. Then Xanax, 2 milligrams twice a day. And I was functional. I was working. It was phenomenal. I mean, I still had pain, but my doctor, because my family approached him and said, "Oh my gosh, you're killing Kathy with all these opiates. What are you doing?" And he said, "You know, you don't know how Kathy's body works. Only Kathy and I know how it works. So with that being said, I'd rather give her quality of life, you know, versus being in a bed curled up in a ball, unable to move. I have fibromyalgia, lupus, chronic pain. I have depression, insomnia, restless leg. Let me see, Parkinson's. You name it, and I probably have it. But my pain levels now in the last 2 years have been unbelievable, and that's because I had to see another doctor because I lost my PPO, and they cut my medicines drastically. And so I spend about 95% of the time in bed now. So it has really, really affected my quality of life, and I was on TPN, which is where you have a port surgically inserted into your chest, and you are intravenously fed 12 to 24 hours a day because I wasn't absorbing any proteins. So, your heart and your other organs need proteins to sustain, to keep them going. And I wasn't absorbing anything. So obviously, if I'm not absorbing food, I'm not absorbing medications. Right. So anyways, that's why such the high dosage. And, this individual, I call him Mr. Devil, who has absolutely no human compassion. If he did and he would listen to our stories, then he would not be so anti-opiates. He's just a addiction specialist. He's not a chronic pain specialist. So how can he even be on the opiate policy board? I just don't even get that one. And so I've tried to reach out to him on Twitter, and I'm going to butcher his last name. I could spell it. KOLONDY.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know
right?
you're talking about. Yeah, I can't say it. Kalana something or other.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll call him Klonopin.
And there's yeah, exactly, Klonopin. Thank you. Pick you out. And that's what he's trying to do because he has special interests. And this is, I've gathered a whole bunch of information from different areas. He's got interest in treatment centers, wanting to make it mandatory for those who use opiates to go in these treatment centers. And who benefits? He does.
Right.
And so
it's all about money in the end, sadly.
Baby, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
It's all about money,
Yep.
And forget all of those, people that want any sort
Well,
of
and the
quality
people
of life.
that are getting that is the insurance companies. They're part of this, and then also the heads of addiction institutions. And they're the ones that have the ears. Yes, they are the ones that have the ears of the legislators on the state level and on, the legislative level. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Clonity.
Yeah.
My friend calls him Darth Vader.
Well, yeah, he definitely is not a good guy. But it's funny how when I would try to tweet to respond to certain things, and say in our side, the chronic pain community side, all of a sudden I'd be blocked.
Yeah, they don't want
No, and they don't want me because I'll get out there loud and proud. I've got a lot of media connections, and if I was on the right medications, watch out. Right. I would be a force. Boy, I'm telling you.
Well, sadly, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I was talking to Dr. Tennant earlier today, and he was telling me that, and he was like, we're just coming into this too late. Like, politically wise, they've been doing this for a while. They have it all set up. We're just starting to get people to come out, because a lot of pain patients do not want to do this. Mm-hmm.
Right. I've been working on this now for a couple of years. So, I've got a lot of information together, and I'm like, what is wrong with everybody? Why don't you call, fax your legislators? Why don't you and so I actually, filed for a patent because I have a really good idea that will really raise awareness. And so I've been waiting for it, but then I'm thinking, you know what? If I wait on it, so many people will suffer. So I want to share my idea, but in the right platform, maybe on your show.
You have my information, right? You have all my information?
I do.
Okay, so
yes.
Yeah, make sure you contact me in the next few days because like next week I'm going to be meeting with all the doctors and everything like that, and we're going to be going over this stuff, and we have a game plan, but you know, it'd be great if you would want to be able to be a part of this. We need everybody to be a part of this. So yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'm part of a you know, advocacy group, you know, with Red and you know, with Dr. Tennant and you know, Stacey and a lot of the people you have on the panel. And they rock, by the way. And
Yes,
Dr. Tennant, I want to be your patient. Just throwing that out there. No, but I live 30 minutes away from them, and I have no doctor now because my young doctor got flagged. She just got her license.
You're in North Carolina?
Flagged. No, I'm in California.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I'm so sorry. I thought you said you were in California.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Dr.
California.
Kline. I'm thinking of Dr. Kline. Okay. Yeah, he has a waiting list.
I followed him
sadly
too on Twitter, you know. Yeah, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there's doctors with cojones. I love it, you know.
Yeah.
You just need to be a lot more on board. You know, everybody needs to speak out. Everybody like gripes and everything on Twitter and all this kind of stuff, but nobody is taking action, which is frustrating to me because all I do is I sit there and I literally send templates out. All you have to do is fill in these lines with your name and then your congressman or, you know, whatever, senators, and just send it in, and they just don't. So it's called being proactive and actually following through, because you know these voices, tons and tons of voices, are going to make a difference. You know, every voice is important.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you calling in and sharing this, and contact me and we will work together, you know, and let's talk more about possibly coming on a show. I think that would be awesome.
Right. Yeah, because I did also my insurance company had said, oh, we're no longer covering your fentanyl patches because you don't have cancer. So I went and I called and talked to the pharmacy department. They were denying. And so I talked with, I think it was 5 managers, 2 supervisors, finally the department head. They were like, well, the department head's gone home already. And I said, it's 5:01. Wow. You mean there's never an emergency? Never an emergency there. You cannot? I said, you don't want to hang up on me because I will call the media next. Well, the department manager got on the phone, and guess what? I got my fentanyl, baby. So anyways, without any documentation or anything, it's just I read from the, you know, pain management, a fundamental right, you know, the UN policy that, you know, not, you know, providing pain management is actually a form of torture, which, you know, they're against. I don't know why we don't use that a lot more as a tool in our fight.
Well, and did you hear tonight, too, one of the doctors was talking about the loophole that you can do?
Yeah, my doctor won't see me anymore. Just won't see me anymore because he's going to be retiring, and you know, he doesn't want and then the young one left, you know, because she got flagged. So it's like now every place that I've called, it's a 5 to 6 month waiting list for chronic pain, you know, to see a chronic pain manager. I won't be here in 5 or 6 months if that's the case. You know, I run out next week, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I've literally prepped my kids, you know, and told them, because they see me in pain. They see me crying. They have to literally straighten my feet because my feet, they curl up and they cramp so bad. I'll be screaming bloody murder, and I'm a tough chick, you know. And anyways, they'll have to grab a hardbound, you know, hardbound book and push it up against my feet to straighten it, and they're like, Mom, it sounds like we're breaking your every bone in your feet. And I'm like, well, just do it.
Yeah.
And
well, you know, and you bring up a good point, because it's really important. I know, like, people that do get their medications now, be prepared for this. You know what I mean? Like, some people have told me, you know, my doctors, they're not supposed to, but they've told me start saving up. But other doctors, even Dr. Tennant talked about it tonight, the things that you need to start doing to prep for that possibility, which he said it's going to be, you know, it's going to happen. So
it's ridiculous. And see, because they slashed my medications at three quarters, you know, I couldn't, you know, stock up. I couldn't do any of that because I was barely surviving on what they were giving me. I would fall all the time. I have pictures of my face all bruised up. You know, another time, all of a sudden, you know, I was intubated and everything. 48 hours later, I woke up in the hospital, didn't know where the heck I was, but it was from a fall, and they said paramedics told us that another 5 minutes, Kathy, you would have been dead. You know, so now I have in-home support for 192 hours a month, which is unbelievable. I mean, that amount of hours. So, you know, that just tells you, you know, how sick I am and how much pain I'm in, but nobody is recognizing it outside of that agency, if you know what I mean.
Right. No, you're right.
The in-home, yeah.
Well,
So,
Kathy, thank you so much for calling in and sharing your story. And make sure you get in touch with me, okay?
You're a doll.
Okay.
I sure will. And thank you so much, everyone that is standing up for chronic pain, you know, the chronic pain community, vets, you know, God bless you. Because, you know, this is just, it's war right now for us, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, have a great night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Okay, all right, bye-bye.
All righty. Well, we have one more call in, and give me one moment here. Sorry. Hello. Oops. Wrong thing. Wrong one. So sorry. And this is going to be our last caller tonight. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me, Janelle?
Hi, Tammy. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
So
we are here. My daughter Nikki is here too.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi,
hello, Nikki. So Tammy, by the way, I just want to let everybody know that's listening in. Her husband is who our vigil was for tonight, along with, you know, all the other chronic pain patients out there, but for Doug Hale. So I just want to say, how are you doing tonight? Are you doing okay?
Yes, it's been a very difficult day, as we expected. It's the first anniversary of his death, but we've had such an outpouring of love and support from family and friends, and frankly from the chronic pain community, and this program, it just really helped us to get through a very, very difficult day.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming on, putting me in touch with all the people. You know, I was crying earlier today because when I woke up, my phone was exploding with emails and messages from people, and I didn't even know them. I've never met them. And they said to me, Janelle, we just want to say we're here. We're chronic pain patients, or advocates, and if you need anything, you just let us know. And I felt so overwhelmed, and like I just didn't expect this, and I'm so impressed with our community because I didn't expect all of this, all these people to come out, and I think this is amazing, and I just want to thank you as well for helping me with this.
No, just, you know, it's all about saving lives.
It's
all about prevention. My heart goes out to that last woman. I know exactly where she's coming from, and it just breaks my heart what she's facing in the next week, and I pray that she can find some help.
Yeah.
The chronic pain community is so incredibly supportive, and there are advocates working so very hard to try to promote change, and if we all work together, that's what it's going to have to take.
Yep.
And I won't stop, for one. I will not stop.
No, you're absolutely right.
And I know you won't.
No, I'm not going to stop either. Nikki, did you want to say anything at all?
I wanted to say thank you to everybody who came tonight to listen, who heard everybody's stories, who contributed, especially the doctors who came and gave their testimony. I do not want to sound overly political, but I want to remind everybody that CDC guidelines exist and are complied with because we as humans agree to comply with them. To change them, all we have to do is change our beliefs. When we fear our government, we no longer live in a democracy. We live in America, which is supposed to be home of the free, home of the brave, but home to where people can be free and receive the treatment that they need for chronic pain or any other condition. We do not live in a totalitarian society. The CDC is not a dictator. If we do not agree with the CDC and we don't believe that what they're doing is correct, let's change our belief as a community and as a society about chronic pain. And thank you to everybody for listening.
So let me ask you something quickly, Nikki, because, by the way, you spoke you speak very well, and that was very well said. How do we get enough people together to be able to do that, actually? Or what are your ideas on that?
From an academic standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people fear speaking up because they fear repercussion. We need to take a stand and tell our government we outnumber you. And when you govern us, you need to govern with compassion. And if you're not willing to govern with compassion, we outnumber you, we will replace you with people who will.
Right.
We voted you in, but we can vote you out. I am not in any way, shape, or form advocating violence. Please, to everybody listening tonight, please, violence is never the answer, ever. But when you believe in something and agree to abide by it, the only reason it exists is because you believe in it. So if you believe it can be changed, it can change.
You're right.
So start believing.
And if
and
enough
start
of us,
telling others.
yeah, if enough of us came together, I mean, that's the power right there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank
Exactly.
you. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
And I'm so sorry for the loss of your father and your husband. All night long, I've been hearing how great he was, and a lot of people put up candles and stuff for him. So I'm really sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. He was a good man. And I pray he's free. And I pray the others who have fallen are free as well. No more pain for them. And no more death for the ones that are suffering, like Kathy.
Yeah. And if you are in chronic pain and you're listening tonight, you are not alone. We hear you. And please know that we will fight for you. You are not a voiceless name in the sea, and we believe in your right to life and compassionate treatment, and we will continue to fight for you.
Well spoken.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we get going here?
No, just thank you, everyone, for participating and for reaching out, for caring, and please stay strong. Like Nikki said, you're not alone. It's an important message for everyone to know.
We hear you. We will fight for you.
Okay. Well, thank you both for coming on again tonight. And Tammi, thank you earlier for, being a part of the panel of guests that we had on this evening. You both are amazing, and many blessings. And, I'm praying that Doug is in a better place right now. So.
He is. And Janelle, thank you for your efforts. You pulled this together.
Thank you so much.
You did an amazing job, and we really look forward to working with you and all the other advocates in the future.
You're welcome, and I look forward to that too. Well, I hope you have a great vacation in Florida for the rest of it at least, so enjoy it.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Con Nation. Well, we are going to get off here. I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in tonight and listening to our guests. And this is a long show. I mean, we've never had a show this long, but I have to say we had the most people on tonight ever. I just want to thank you all for tuning in. And this is a real thing. Pain is a real thing. Do we deserve to get treated like cattle or like not even like animals? I mean, animals are treated better sometimes than what we're being treated as. We don't deserve that. We all deserve to have the best quality of life as possible, right? None of us asked for this stuff. So what I'm saying is everybody out there, anybody out there, whether you have a loved one, whether it's yourself that is being affected by this, or if you're not being affected by this, you're probably not listening, but you just never know when that can happen. What I'm asking is that we all come together, just like Nikki was saying just a minute ago. You know, we need to come together because that is where the power is. We are the ones that vote in all the people to come and do this, so we have to do this. And this is not a matter of when it's going to happen, or if it's going to happen. It's a when it's going to happen. So I know Dr. Tennant gave some great ideas last Tuesday when he was on, and tonight too, on what we need to be doing as patients, pain patients that are on some type of opiates, what you need to be preparing for now. I'm starting to do it, and I'm telling, we all need to start doing that if you're on anything and you're still getting them. So, all right, well, I am not going to have shows next week. We are going to play some reruns. I want to be able to focus on this very subject. We are going to be, I'm going to be working with the doctors that are on this evening and a few of the advocates that are on this evening, and we are going to figure out what we're going to do. I know they already have some ideas on it, so I don't want to say too much, but I will be putting that out everywhere on social media. I will also put it up on our website when we have it ready. I do want to say, though, I will be asking all chronic pain patients and any loved ones of chronic pain patients or former chronic pain patients, we are going to be asking you to write a personal letter. If you don't know how to write that, I'll create a template that you can do and sign, but we need those letters, because then what we're going to do is I need them either emailed back or mailed back to me, and I will photocopy them, and we are going to have a delegate from each state, a pain delegate, go and hand deliver it to them and have a few things to say. There's also a few other things that we have in the works, but I'd love if you would be a part of that. Again, thank you for tuning in this evening, and I hope you all have a good night. Good evening, Call Nation.
You've been listening to a special edition of The Call Show with Janelle Elgaway. The Call Show is copyright 2017 by EXG LLC. All rights reserved.